have something cool to share with you. You may or may not know this, but who is the biggest issuer of debt in Canada? Which group?
Federal government, no?
Nope. Rich is going to open up his computer with I saw Rich's computer yesterday. I said, show me your work. He said, well, this tab here has 8,762 charts. I'm like, wow.
So you're saying it's not the federal government? I'm going to take a second guess. Could it be like the issuer of debt?
Yeah.
The single issuer of debt? Is this a trick question?
Yeah, this is a trick.
Well, it's not a trick question. It's okay. It's the provinces on an aggregate level. So provincial debt is greater than federal debt. And the reason it's important is because federal debt, like the most liquid, I did research on this a couple of years ago, so before the pandemic, the most liquid provincial debt, I think it's the Ontario 10-year bond at the time. It had about 20% liquidity of the federal government 10-year bond. So remember when the provinces, like Newfoundland, had to get bailed out effectively back in March of 2020. And it was only because they were first up. They had an issuance coming up, and that's it. If it was Nova Scotia or BC, it would have been them. It just happened. Newfoundland had bad luck with it. So right now, if we're going down this road in Canada where, we could, growth is going to slow, say other things can happen. And remember, when you get a crisis, liquidity dries up. Like money flows to the most liquid security, which would be the 10-year bond issued from Ottawa. Provincial debt, it dries up. There's no way you can get out of this stuff. However, I think we were talking about this earlier, there is one province, and actually two provinces in Canada, that will do very well coming up in this environment because energy has gone so high. And so Steve, why don't you share with us what you're talking about earlier?
I was just saying before the show, before we started recording, that I was talking about the bull market that's obviously happening in Alberta, particularly the housing market's exploded. I mean, it's off the charts. That I'm actually just reviewing it right now. So the Alberta government based its budget deficits on $70. So it was $70 a barrel oil. Obviously, we know where it's at today, north of 100. So again, will that continue? Maybe not, but I think structurally, I think that we're going to see elevated oil prices over the next sort of 3 to 5 years due to these supply constraints that are not just related to what's happening in Russia, but the lack of exploration moving forward. So basically, long story short, is Alberta is going to be running massive surpluses for at least the next couple of years. And as Rich said, that will probably equate to more, you'll see a lot more public schools suddenly start popping up. Because Alberta, it was suffering quite a bit, talking about cutting like nurses and school teachers' wages because, they were running these deficits, trying to get their balances back in line, obviously due to the oil bear market that we've had over the previous, say, 5 years. And so that picture is changing very, very quickly.
Can I just ask a question though about so I understand the liquidity issue for the provincial versus federal debt. Mind you, I would say that it's probably a lot closer than it was, let's say 10 years ago, because of what's happened over the last 2 years. But my question is, doesn't the federal government just back the provincial, like after that liquidity event? And you get that like schism, wouldn't the federal government just be like, okay, we're gonna transfer 1-for-1 all of the provincial debt for federal debt? I mean, wouldn't that happen? I don't get why not though.
That's never happened. So they might have to go down that.
I mean, never is a.
It hasn't happened yet, but that's the point though. So again, you go back to the Newfoundland experience from March of 2020. Again, they had, I don't know what the number was. They just had to roll over. They had issuance to maturing. You got to roll it over.
But they're not going to let Newfoundland default. I mean, there's a way.
So here's what happened though, Rich. The Finmen in Newfoundland, they called Ottawa and they say, hey, we're in trouble here. Like we need to borrow in 4 days. And, our team is telling us, or our bankers are saying, there's no bid on this. So we need your help. And then all of a sudden the phone rings. It's Ontario. And they're saying, hey, like we need help here. We were not going to be able to roll over debt, and then Quebec calls and Saskatchewan and whatever. So what happens? What happened next is that they call the Bank of Canada and they say, hey, this is what's happening. We need a solution. I mean, that's what went down. So the Bank of Canada effectively backed the issuance for Newfoundland getting the debt.
And I remember that they did. If you look at the Bank of Canada's balance sheet, the growth in provincial debt went from 0 to I don't remember the figure, but it was a large portion of the balance sheet expansion at the onset of the pandemic.
Yeah, it really was. So I mean, I know a lot of investors in Canada in the fixed income world. If you want income, you're not getting a lot from federal government debt or mutual funds that are buying that stuff. So then you move up a step. You start buying provincial debt. So there are some funds out there, they just hold provincial debt. And just go back and look at what the experience of that fund was back in Q1 of that year, sorry, in 2020, or just for the month, and you'll say, holy smokes, this thing just dropped like a stone. And that's the point. If there's no liquidity in a market, then there's no one willing to buy it. And that's what makes US Treasury so great. You can buy and sell it like gobs of it one day to the next, and no, you ain't going to move the price that much. But the more illiquid a security is or a market is. So again, coming back to Canada, so like maybe the demise of Canada, I don't use that word demise, but maybe the event that escalates stress across the Canadian system, it comes from one of the provinces really running into trouble. So I don't know which province consumes the most oil. I don't know. I'm just taking a guess. It might be Ontario, maybe. But whereas Alberta should be doing pretty well over the next 12, 18, 24 months, maybe. There's always a loser on the other side. So if you figure out who that loser is, that's where maybe the spark could come.
Who's the most indebted province? Do you know? I don't remember.
It's probably Quebec. No, I'm kidding. I'm from Quebec, so I have to say that. I'm kidding.
I think it's Quebec and or Ontario on an absolute basis. It is Ontario. I mean, they have a ton of it.
What again, I was going to say, doesn't Ontario also have like the highest like tax rates too? Like it's just like, I mean, how much more blood can they squeeze from a stone?
Yeah, it's pretty high over here as well. So, but that's the point though. As long as you can continue to borrow, you keep rolling things over. But the moment that you can't roll over your debt, that's when it gets a bit tight out there. And as we keep talking about, like our view is that, a problem in Canada, I do not think it's going to be a domestic event. It's going to be an international event that will trigger something domestically. So that's why you need to be very keen and focused and interested on what's happening around the world with all this stuff.
Quick question for you. We'll wrap it up here, but do you have any thoughts on municipal debt? Like, is that from what I understand, municipalities aren't allowed to like legally run deficits, right? They have to basically run balanced budgets.
I think that's right.
Yes, but what do you mean though? Thoughts on it from which perspective?
I guess in terms of liquidity, they must have ran into a jam there. They did run into a jam during the pandemic as well. But
so most municipalities, like they're either borrowing, directly through a banking conglomerate or through the province and stuff like that. Some of the large, I would call like agency type debt, like Ontario Hydro, like those kinds of things are out there. But like, the city of Halifax, for example, if you can find their debt, it's not trading. Like it's locked up in a fund somewhere.
Funny story. I was chatting with a municipal government in Vancouver, and very, very well connected. But yeah, he was just saying like, yeah, it's like they're just talking about like real estate and development. Because this is our lifeblood of our tax revenues coming in. It's like the developers community amenity contribution. So like they're like, we need new density and new housing supply, or like effectively said it's a Ponzi scheme otherwise, right? Like I think most things in life turn out are Ponzi in nature, right? Like they rely on more and more debt issuance or taxation to sort of sustain itself.